We have to appreciate the prison officers who are recruited to protect the prisoners. They are workers like us, so when they saw us being thrown into prison, they were in solidarity with us. We are earning part salaries, be it the teacher, the prison guard, the police officer. We all earn the same. Of course, the prison conditions are the worst you can imagine, with you are caged in cold cells. Imagine in this winter. But also the worst part is also that you are in the same cell with people who have already been convicted. This is not allowed if you are going to read your prison act, where those who are in remand are supposed not to be convicted into the same space with those who have been convicted. So it was really an experience where the state was using the judiciary to try to silence us, to break us down, and they are unfortunately using our prison system to cage us. Even the pre-trial detention is too long and unacceptable. It is very unfortunate that when we shout on top of our voices demanding the basics that we need a living wage, the state of Emerson Mnangagwa choose to throw frivolous charges like the one they threw recently at me. But why we continue demanding a living wage? It is because we want to live a dignified life like any other citizen. We have a right to dignity. We have a right to even to shelter, to food, among other basics. And we can only be able to access the basics if we are earning a living wage. It's very unfortunate that Emerson Mnangagwa chooses to criminalize organized labor. But the freedom of association and assembly is provided for in our constitution. It is also provided for in some of the conventions that we've signed up to, be it the ILO Convention 87 and even the Convention 98. So it is very unfortunate that the government of Zimbabwe chooses to be an enemy of the people, an enemy of the workers, and chooses to completely disregard the law, completely disregard our fundamental freedoms, whilst we are supposed to be celebrating the fruits of the victories of the liberation struggle, a struggle which was fought for freedom, justice, and equality. It is very unfortunate that the likes of Mthuli are choosing to be clowns at a time where you expect them to be delivering a service which is commensurate with the professorship which he claims to hold. At the end of the day, you look at the kind of salaries that we are earning. We have the pay slip where we used to earn 540. We have the pay slips when some were earning 570 and even above that, depending on the grade. And for them to come up and try to convince us that we never earned such, this is the highest level of lunacy. It is a clear indication that we are dealing with the people who are not sincere when we are asking them to engage in the discourse of reviewing and restoring the value of our salaries to the pre-October 2018 era. But what our message to Mthuli Ncube is, 540 is no longer enough. Look, inflation is also being experienced in US dollar terms. We have been generous enough to this government and said we are simply requesting the 540 of pre-October 2018. We are not demanding what we should be earning now, because that 540 has been eroded by inflation in US dollar terms. But we know that we are in a developing country and resources may be scarce, and we are being conservative and say we need just $540 as a minimum for a teacher, for a civil servant. That's not too much to ask for. Looking at the kind of luxuries they are enjoying, looking at the fact that Mthuli Ncube's own children are even staying in Switzerland, where obviously they pay gobble more than a teacher's salary at breakfast. We know the amount of money they spend on transport and other luxuries. We are not asking for luxuries ourselves. We want the basics. We want accommodation, we want food, we want transport, we want to be able to be transported to our workplaces. We want to deliver the best for the children that we're entitled to be teaching in the classroom. And we can only be doing that if we are capacitated, are able to live, to eat, and access the basics. Bo is in Mnangagwa's court. Mnangagwa was elected to deliver on education to the people of Zimbabwe. And for him to be able to deliver on education, he must be able to capacitate the agents who deliver education in the classroom. So Emerson Mnangagwa must take note that he has a responsibility to ensure that the almost 5 million learners in Zimbabwe are accessing quality education. And the first step is to pay teachers a living wage. Teachers are human beings first. They have their own needs to be attended to before they take up the role of teaching in the classroom. If those needs are not addressed, it is extremely difficult for a teacher to be in the classroom teaching. And for those who expect teachers to be foolish enough to be teaching other people's children when they cannot pay fees for their own children, they should know that such a dream is never going to be realized, because teachers are not stupid, teachers are not foolish, they know their rights, and the teachers are going to press hard until they force the government of the day to deliver. It is up to the citizens of Zimbabwe that if this government fails to deliver on the right to education for their own children, do they want to retain them for another term and deny their own children the right to education? Because at the end of the day, the citizens have to decide whether they want a government which decides to punish their children by denying them education, or they would at the end of the day choose to do away with such a government which is against the hopes and aspirations of the collective citizens of our people who are dreaming of a better future where children should learn freely in our schools, accessing the best education that is available. If the people choose this to entrust the ZANU-PF government with other 5 years of ruining this country, that is up to them, and at the end of the day, we can't expect something different from what we have witnessed in the past. For 42 years, we have seen that ZANU-PF, initially they were trying to expand access to social services, but in the context of Emmerson Mnangagwa from 2017, we realized that things have changed. What we've seen is massive pillaging of national resources, massive looting of national resources, and massive withdrawal of social services from our people. We've seen the collapse of health services. We've seen the collapse of our education system. And if people are so excited to see the collapse of our education system, it's up to them. For 5 years, 2023 to 2028, we are going to endure the same. For 5 years again, we are going to be seeing the massive repression that we've witnessed under Emmerson Mnangagwa. Where people are arrested because they've asked for a meal, where the judiciary is being used as a weapon to punish a dissenting voice, where our law is weaponized. So the choice is for the citizens to make. And honestly, if the decision of the citizens is to say we want to be exploited forever, we want to suffer forever, we want to enjoy deprivation forever, then it is their choice and we can't do much. But as teachers, as a grouping, we will continue fighting the fight. Whether ZANU-PF is in power or not, our fight is never going to change. We have clearly defined the lines. What we want is just a living wage for our members so that we deliver the best service to the almost 5 million learners which are entrusted in our hands. It is very unfortunate that a teacher is expected to, some of them, to spend almost $4 going to and from work for transport alone. But if they are going to spend that much, $4 per day for transport alone, and they are going to work for 20 days in a month, that means they are going to spend $80 in 1 month for transport. Then they obviously need accommodation, and accommodation for a family maybe of 6, you need up to $300 if that accommodation is going to be habitable, proper sanctuary which is habitable. So that already that's gobbled up to $380 just for accommodation and transport. We are not even looking at the amount of food they are going to consume, healthy care. We are not looking at other responsibilities. But with the 380, the ordinary teacher doesn't earn the same. So an ordinary teacher can earn the $100 which is a special allowance, and $75 which is a COVID-19 allowance. Then almost, if we are going to be generous with the rate, we can say another $100 in the form of the salary. So that's around $275. So at the end of the day, this is a teacher who is expected to make a miracle and survive. So at the end of the day, the teacher cannot make it to the classroom because they can't afford transport. They cannot have they do not have the capacity to be planning for the next lesson, to evaluate the output of the learner's work, among other basic responsibilities expected from a teacher. So we have a teacher who is being squeezed by an unresponsive system to make miracles. You look at our own cost of living in Zimbabwe. It is over 50% the cost of living in a country like South Africa, our neighbor South Africa. But you look at the salary of a teacher in South Africa. A teacher in South Africa might earn the lowest teacher might earn as much as USD $1,000, the least paid teacher. But their cost of living is way below our cost of living. But we are earning less than a quarter of what they are earning. So what that means is that this teacher is living in extreme poverty. The teacher in Zimbabwe is living in extreme poverty, is enduring a serious exploitation from an ungrateful employer. ARTUZ is a formation founded by the suffering teachers of Zimbabwe. The ordinary teacher in the streets of Zimbabwe, in the classrooms of Zimbabwe, are the founders of ARTUZ, and they drive ARTUZ. There is a mistake from some, especially the state, who assume that Obert Masaraure is ARTUZ. I'm just a small player in the bigger matrix of ARTUZ. ARTUZ is a bigger player which is owned by the collective majority of the teachers in Zimbabwe. So when they arrest me, at times they think they're going to paralyze the command structure of ARTUZ. They think they're going to paralyze the mission of ARTUZ. At times they think they are able to erode the moral authority or the moral ground which ARTUZ stands on. But that's not possible because, for example, to begin with, the command structure of ARTUZ is horizontal, where each and every member of the union is afforded a chance to democratically push forward ideas which are then embraced by the collective and are pushed forward. So if they choose to arrest an individual like Obert Masaraure, they cannot paralyze the command structure because it remains intact, being driven by the collective majority. And also when they try to paralyze our mission, which is to fight for labor justice for the teachers, inclusive access to education for our learners, they cannot paralyze such a mission because it is a mission which is in the hearts of the majority of the teachers. And these teachers can be able to push forward this mission with or without Obert Masaraure. They can no longer be able to also erode the moral authority or the moral ground which we stand on as ARTUZ because it's so much solid because we fight for something that is justifiable, which is legitimate, which is within the confines of the laws of this republic. What we ask for as ARTUZ is labor justice for the teachers and inclusive access to education. At the end of the day, I think this is like the wolves saying the sheep at some point is complaining that they wish the wolf away. The sheep have every right to demand the wolf away, to ask the wolf to leave. Why? Because ARTUZ has been a victim of the current state. The current state has been punishing us. They've denied us a living wage, and whenever we have complained, they've arrested us, they've tortured us, they've abducted us, they've thrown us into the cold prison cells simply for asking for a living wage. And we are well aware that the constitution of this republic provides for regime change. So regime change is not a criminal enterprise. It is a constitutional enterprise which can be embarked on by citizens as they seek a better life. In this process of trying to seek a better life, we can choose to even organize and mobilize for the change of the current government. But we have not done that. We have confined ourselves to our work of demanding a living wage from this current government. And we want this current government to deliver for our people. We will not defer our lives to the next election. We will put pressure on this current regime of Emmerson Mnangagwa to deliver on the labor rights as espoused in Section 65 of the Constitution of this land, of which Section 65 says every worker has a right to a fair wage. And this is what we are demanding, just a fair wage. Every worker has a right to organize, to engage in collective job actions, to protest, to take to the streets. And these are the constitutional rights which we have sought to exercise. And Emmerson Mnangagwa tends to criminalize that. But we will not allow him to get away with it. We will push him until he realizes that he has a constitutional obligation to provide for the working class of Zimbabwe. They can call us whatever they want to call us, but we won't be moved. We remain principled, and our position is clear. We are only fighting for labor justice and inclusive access to education. Giving up is never an option on the table, and I don't think our generation or the next generation of ARTUZ members is ever going to give up, and we don't think victory is elusive. We have already started realizing some signs of victory. We have seen the fake victory that ARTUZ is growing from leaps and bounds. It is now one of the biggest unions in Zimbabwe, and we are confident that maybe in the next 5 years ARTUZ will be the biggest union in Zimbabwe because of its culture of fighting for what is right. So getting more members on board is victory on itself, because you need the numbers on your side for your voice to be heard. And we have made big strides towards realizing that, and ARTUZ is soon going to be the giant in Zimbabwe with regards to teacher representation. Secondly, we have realized that we have made headway, and the government has been forced to accept that we are a trade union that they have to engage. Initially, they were disregarding us. They thought they could block us from engaging in trade unionism. They tried even to criminalize our existence. But we have managed to fight that hard, and they can now recognize that ARTUZ is there and they are willing to engage us. We have realized that even the sellout unions at the Apex Council, who thought they could ignore us, they can no longer ignore us. They have to invite us and ask for our ideas. How do we move forward as a collective? So we are reforming the labor terrain in Zimbabwe. It is no longer business as usual, where the government would get away with anything and everything. They know that it is no longer possible because we are introducing a new culture of trade unionism, which is now being embraced by not only the teachers themselves, but other players in the broader broader civil service who have already been there, but they now realize that they have a mandate to be fighting. So we bring a new culture, and that culture is victory in itself if it's embraced. It is a culture of internal democracy within the union, and a culture of consistent fighting against injustice, and it is being embraced by the broader working class movement, and we are happy that we brought that fighting spirit. So that's victory for us, and it is not possible for Emerson Mnangagwa's government and even for future governments to ignore the voice of ARTUZ, which is a voice which is a voice of reason, a voice which is grounded in constitutionalism, and a voice which inspires the broader working class. And eventually the working class will win because it has never been defeated. It was the working class which led the liberation struggle. That is why the liberation struggle was won. It is the working class which is going to complete the liberation project and ensure that the promise of freedom, justice, and equality is delivered on. Yeah, we have been engaging government from day one. We have been engaging government in different meetings. We have written petitions to government, thousands of petitions now. You will know the government's response. When we end in a petition, most of the time they get us arrested for simply ending in a petition. For us, that is engagement. They would have waited and expected a response, but they will get us arrested. We have engaged governments in boardrooms, but they choose not to listen to our voice, and they choose to confine themselves to the spirit of austerity, a spirit which forces them not to pay us a living wage. We have responded, we have engaged government even in the company of corporates from the Apex Council. We have engaged government even as the Federation of Zimbabwe Educators Union. But we now know the attitude of the government of the day. The attitude of the government of the day is austerity. They are determined to withdraw any form of payment or service to the ordinary people and channel such resources to the luxuries of the elite. So it's austerity for the working class, but luxuries for the ruling elites. We know the attitude of government, that their attitude is repression. They are prepared to turn the institutions which are supposed to be protecting us, to turn them against us and use the same institutions to victimize us. So at the end of the day, really, it's not about our goodwill. It's not about our intention to engage government. It's not about if we have an attitude to engage or not. It is the hostile attitude of the government of the day. The government of the day views us as enemies. Why? Because they think that if they pay us well, we will be eating into their luxuries. So they believe that the only way to silence us is to arrest us, to abduct us, to torture us, which is unsustainable. If this country is going to progress, we have to be engaging genuinely in dialogue. We have to find peaceful solutions to conflict. And one of the solutions which is urgently needed to the labor conflict we are enduring is just a living wage for the teachers. But also what is also important to take note of is that we don't have space for genuine collective bargaining in Zimbabwe. The legal framework doesn't really support genuine collective bargaining. Of course, you look at the statutory instrument 143 of 1997, which establishes the National Joint Negotiating Council, where the Apex Council is engaged with government officials to try to discuss the conditions of service for the civil servants. You realize that that framework no longer works. It is now ultra-vires to the provisions of Section 65 of the Constitution, because the framework of the NJNC is a framework where the workers have to beg the government. But the framework of the Constitution is a framework where the two parties have to go around and come up with an agreement, which is healthy for labor. Because we believe that if we are going to be locked in a room for a day, 2 days, 5 days, or any other day, and then eventually we agree with the government on anything, we are so confident that if the workers' side will be able to respect it, even if the amount of income is very little, but if it is coming out of negotiations, if it is coming out of an engagement, we'll be able to respect it. But currently we have a government which is behaving like a Father Christmas, who want to give us our salaries if it's a gift of some sort, where they choose the amount they can grant us, even our conditions of service. They don't want to dialogue, they don't want to engage in collective bargaining, they want to fix them from the comfort of their offices without even engaging our side as organized labor. You are aware that 50% of our learners failed to sit for public examinations last year. That's a serious crisis, where we are expecting almost 1.2 million learners to write public examinations, grade 7, Form 4 and A level, but only around 600,000 are able to sit. And more are going to miss out this year. You are well aware that the examination fees that have been pegged, a minimum for someone sitting for all level, for ordinary level, they have to pay up to $77 as a minimum. It's going to be paid in a space of 4 days for them to be able to register. And we're going to see more of learners, even over 50% failing to access the right to education. But more are dropping out. Almost 1 million have dropped out of all schools beginning 2020. What the message is so clear that education in Zimbabwe has been commodified, and the commodity is now accessible by the elites. The majority of our poor people are failing to access it. Our young girls are getting into child marriages. We see them pregnant at 14 and supposed to be taking care of families. Our young boys are taking into drugs. We are seeing them on the streets taking serious drugs, which is a serious social ill, is a serious hazard to their own health. We are seeing a lot of child labor because learners are dropping out of school. We have seen that the learners who are going to school are not learning because the teachers are not teaching. So there's no teaching and learning taking place. Our schools are now very idle. They've been reduced to playing grounds where learners are just going there to loiter around. So this is a serious crisis that we face. We also see some flaws in our own curriculum, a curriculum which was not successfully reformed to meet the contextual realities of our nation. So we see a lot of demands against around continuous assessment and learning activities, and parents are failing to meet the same. We see the underfunding of our education, where government is only paying as little as 12% of budgetary allocation towards education, at a time where the Dakar Declaration would ask them to pay up to 20% towards our education. We can see the big gap of infrastructure, where learners are still learning under trees, where learners don't have laboratories, they don't have access to libraries. But even learners from in Binga are expected to write ICT examinations, but they've never seen a computer, they don't know electricity, but they're supposed to write a practical examination in ICT. So we have an education system which is locked in a serious crisis, a crisis of underfunding, a crisis of bad policing, policies, and a crisis of centralization, where we failed to devolve our education management, and we still have one authority in Harare trying to manage a national education system, and this has weakened our capacity to really deliver. So at the end of the day, all the gains which we had realized in the past are being wiped out by the incompetence of the current government, and also the policy attitude of the current government. We pray that Zimbabwe can quickly turn around with regard to education, and we recommend 5 basic points of intervention, which we call adapt. One, we are saying let's adequately fund our education. D, we are saying let's democratize and devolve our education management. Why do we want to democratize? We have seen some of the West education managers being promoted and appointed. Why? Because they are loyal to ZANU-PF, but they don't have capacity to deliver on the mandate. So we want to democratize and we want to develop. But also, we also need a situation where we engage in curriculum reform to ensure that the curriculum meets the expectations of the 21st century. But we also want the P to promote, we want to promote labor justice for the teachers. If the teachers are not happy, the school is not functional. But the T is also for technological and infrastructure investment. We still believe that Nzaramasanga was right, that we need an education equalization fund. So we need that education equalization fund as soon as yesterday, so that the fund can be deployed towards infrastructure development in our schools. Our schools should all have electricity. Our schools should all have access to ICT, should all have connected to the internet, and no learner is supposed to be learning under a tree.